Hello everyone, I'm Dana and I work as a care assistant in North Norfolk. Unfortunately, I am leaving my job to take on university, but I thought before I go I could put together a little video for people who are maybe just starting out as a carer, because I know when I first started 3 years ago wasn't the best time. There was a lot of things to comprehend, so I've put together a little list of things I've learned and little tricks to help you get through. To start with, I thought I'd talk about pseudo-creme. A lot of people I work with use pseudo-creme. It's like the old classic cream, and basically you just want the tiniest, like minuscule amount, like probably not even that, and just rub it in. But one thing I have learnt with pseudo-creme is to not put it on the groin or the bottom when the patient is incontinent, because pseudo-creme can actually block the pad and will, well, I think you can guess what would happen. But if you really had to use it, just the tiniest amount. And usually when it comes to any sores around the bottom or the groin, you use what's called Sorbiderm or Mediderma, a barrier cream essentially, to stop the sore from getting any worse. The next thing I wanted to talk about is Yakult. I learned pretty early on from one of my patients that this stuff's actually really good when you're on antibiotics, because unfortunately antibiotics apparently take away your bad bacteria but also some of your good bacteria, and the Yakult is a probiotic, so it just helps to keep some of the good bacteria going in your body. Next thing I wanted to talk about is catheters. Essentially, a catheter, if you don't know what it is like a little tube with a bag that goes into the bladder. You can have it through your stomach, through your penis, through the vagina. It just essentially for people maybe who've had prostate cancer, or just really elderly and can't make it to the toilet anymore. A lot of people have it while they're in hospital after they've had an operation, but essentially all your urine goes into this little bag that you empty. But one thing I learned when I first started was actually that I thought this person had an infection, which can happen, but sometimes the tube of the catheter goes purple. And sometimes that can mean an infection, but always ask your patient if they've had beetroot that day or the day before, because apparently beetroot can actually dye it. So you might end up with a patient who doesn't actually have an infection, it's just that they have had beetroot and it stained it. So be aware of that. The next thing I learned, I haven't got an actual stocking, but I've got a knee-high sock. You'll probably come across a lot of these in the job because there's just so many elderly people that need them for circulation and things. But because they are quite tight, they can be a nightmare to get on. There are certain things like this little cage that you sort of roll it onto and you can sort of push it on that way. You'll probably learn how to do that in your carer training. And sometimes there's ones that don't have toes. They have the toes sort of taken out, and you have this sort of pixie sock, we called it. It's essentially a slide sheet sock that you can slip it over, and that's quite a good one if you can use that. But if you just have a normal sock like this and you don't happen to have the little cage, or even if they do and they don't like using it, if you turn the sock inside out and you just pop the toe in until you get to the heel, so kind of like this, if you can see that, and then you just pop your toe in and you pop it into the heel, gets to the heel, and then you just literally pop it up and slide it up the foot, and you've got the sock on. But you've also got to be careful with stockings. You cannot have wrinkles or creases. You've got to make sure you've got all of those out, because they can cause sores, and you don't want a sore. You don't want to deal with that, because that's extra on top of everything else you've got to do, as well as causing the poor client a lot of pain. Right. The next thing I really wanted to talk about is encouraging independence, because I love every single person I work with, but sometimes there's been the odd one or two that like to rush through things, and sometimes that means doing every little thing for them. But that's not encouraging that person's independence, which is what we're there to do. We're there to help them with what they need, but if they can do something themselves, let them do it. For example, I have a lady I go to that no one else seems to do, but I make her do her buttons herself, because although some people maybe with arthritis in their hands can't do buttons, so you will have to do things like that for some people, but this lady can definitely do buttons herself. Sometimes you don't really think about it, you just sort of automatically do it, but it's really good to try and get them to do their own buttons and their cuffs and anything they can do themselves. Get them to do it, because honestly, they might sort of grumble and think, oh, but you're here to do that, this is what I pay you for. But in the end, they're actually really pleased that they managed to do it themselves. And it's really important that you keep that with them, that independence. Another actual little tip that I learnt when I was training, one of my trainers who took me out to shadow, he said that when it comes to cars, obviously, because I'm a home carer, so I have to use my car to go to multiple different houses. So my car can face quite a lot of things. You get scrapes, you get scratches, tyres blow, all sorts that can happen in a car, essentially. But to see it through, to make it run a bit easier, sometimes it's worth just paying a little extra for super petrol and diesel. I know on a carer's pay, it can be quite difficult because we don't get paid a lot. Unfortunately, that is just the nature of the job at the moment. Hopefully one day the pay will go up, but at the minute it's not the greatest. But if you just have a few extra pennies, seriously spend it on some super petrol, because it will just keep your car flowing nicely, and hopefully you won't have as many problems, and you can get to people and even go do other things after work that won't cause you any hell. The sort of last things I want to talk about is making sure you be really patient. Because there are some people, again, who don't encourage independence, but also they're not patient and not always kind, unfortunately. You'll always get the one person that's not the most kind or the most patient, but it is so crucial that they keep patient and kind and caring, because that is the job. Some people are a lot slower than others when it comes to mobility. Some people are slower when it comes to thought, like dementia patients, for instance. It's just very sad when people aren't patient with them, because they cannot help being the way that they are, and it's your job to help them through it. It doesn't matter if you go over time. I know some people you'll come across are really on it with getting to the point of the end of the call because they don't want to pay any extra, but some people do need that extra time, just that extra little bit of care. I've done it before where someone's been so worried about spending so much money that I have signed out early and then helped them with something else, because again, that's just the job. You're there to help people, and if they need just a little extra help, then you're there to give it. Because if you were in their shoes, what would you want to happen? But talking about that leads me on to self-care. When I started this job, I lost all my self-care. I didn't have showers as often as I would. I would completely ignore any skincare routine. I was in a really bad place when I first started because I was so tired with all the hours that had to be put in. But it is so important that you keep on top of that. Care for other people still, but you need to care for yourself, because if you don't care for yourself, how can you care for other people as well? You need to take what you're saying to your patients and put it onto yourself as well. So that's all I've got to say, really. And if anyone has any questions or queries that I can maybe help with, just leave a comment below and I'll try and get back to you, or even send us a message. Thank you for listening. I hope any of this may have helped. See you.